Welcome to you both, and I all of your credentials for both of you because I'd be reading all night. So, what are you up to?
What am I up to lately? I've been doing a lot of seminars, a lot of workshops and lectures. We're in the midst of getting a new facility on the go, so hopefully January we'll start construction with that.
And not only that, you have a DVD out.
Yes,
Tell me about it.
It came out just about, I would say, a year to the date.
Okay.
And it's DVD on warm-up to strength training. As far as I'm concerned, this is probably the most misunderstood aspect of training. Many people go through it haphazardly. They rush through their warm-ups. And so I figured it was time to get something out that explains this in a little more detail.
And what would you say your general philosophy is when you're training people? Is there something that sets you apart from other trainers?
I would say...
Okay, great question. Let's talk about mobility issues. If someone does have an injury on one particular side of their body or something's going on there, what are your initial thoughts with a wrist especially?
Well, there is plenty of research that indicates a crossover effect in that if you train one side, you will affect neurally the other side. So will it affect your symmetry? Yes, it will initially. However, at least it will get some neural flow to the other side. The other thing that you should consider, of course, this is an excellent question, and there's been quite a debate in the literature. I would highly recommend you research a man by the name of Dr. Doug McGuff. They are starting to recommend weight training over aerobic training, believe it or not, for cardiac patients. It can get a little technical, but if you do a search on Doug McGuff, M-C-G-U-F-F, you'll get some pretty interesting answers.
And why the resistance training versus the, can you simply explain
I can elaborate. Basically, when you do aerobic training, the intensity is too low, and therefore the pressure response is too low to bring the blood back up to the heart. Whereas with weight training, the resistance and the intensity is slightly higher, therefore you get a stronger contraction to bring the flow back up to the heart. And so what they've noticed is, no matter how good of aerobic conditioning you are, it doesn't necessarily correlate with cardiac health. You've had many experts, for instance, Jim Fix, Brian Maxwell, Ed Burke, who have, these guys have the highest max VO2, yet they have...
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have two non-exercise related suggestions.
Okay.
Number one, make sure you're drinking enough water. Taking at least your, about half your body weight in ounces of water a day, number one. Number two, reduce the amount of grains in your diet. Research has shown that there's a blueprint for grains, and many people are intolerant to grains, that actually the body, as it attacks the grain, will also attack the synovium or the synovial fluid that lines the joints and can cause arthritic type of condition. I had an aerobics instructor that came to me a couple years ago, and she said, you know, John Paul, I do millions of crunches. I can never feel my abdominals.
Yeah.
And I explained to her that your abdominals are not really endurance fibers. They're more of what we call high threshold or fast twitch fibers. So they respond better to heavier weights, more resistance. And so I gave her a program where we started. Okay, number one, when you hear the term osteoporosis, this is a very real condition for not only aging females, but also aging males. Most of the time you'll hear start walking. Okay? People consider walking as weight-bearing exercise. That's not necessarily true. Weight-bearing exercise is generally in the form of resistance training. Walking initially may be better than laying on the couch, yes, but eventually you're going to have to increase the intensity.
And the load, you mean, right?
The load needs to increase, and quite frankly, walking for most people is just a simple form of locomotion. It's not intense enough. So I recommend...
Okay, great question, but we had a bit of an eye roll over here. Can you explain that?
Well, I completely agree with your trainer.
Okay.
If your goal, like most people, is to reduce body fat, then why do an activity like aerobic work before strength training that can actually rob your strength, that can decrease energy levels? You're much better off doing your strength training while you are fresh first, and to do your aerobics there afterwards, because you can tap into fat more readily at that point. As far as stretching between exercises, it depends on the form of stretching and what type of stretches you're doing.
Let's talk about the myths that a woman will bulk up from doing resistance training.
First of all, Einstein once said, insanity defined is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So if you've been doing cardio for a long period of time and you haven't been getting quite the results you're after, perhaps that's an indication that maybe you should try something else.
Yeah.
So, with regards to weight training, okay, with beta blockers in particular, in fact, Tanya filmed a little spot at our studio. I had an individual that was on beta blockers to lower his BP. We got him off within a month of proper resistance training. In fact, I had him do no aerobic training whatsoever. With a proper diet, with a sound diet, utilizing certain anti-inflammatory compounds. For instance, I'm a huge fan.
John Paul?
I'd say typically after Halloween, most people will gain about 6 pounds until, January 1st, right?
And then they gain another 6?
And then they gain another 6 and then another 6. So what I would suggest is stress is huge in our lives right now. Try to curb the amount of stress, A, by exercising, and B, if there's one big tip I would give people,